WTBQ.
Welcome back to Fighting Back here on WTBQ, 1110 AM, 99.1 FM. We've an excellent guest today, Peter Eric Hendrickson, author of the book Cracking the Code. Pete, you wrote another book also, correct? Was it Upholding the Law?
Upholding the Law and Other Observations, that's correct.
Excellent book. Pete, before the break, you were talking about the history of the income tax, and you know, I think it's almost it's trying to quench someone's thirst with a fire hose almost, because the issue is so enormous. You do a great job in the book, though, boiling it down to key points that need to be understood. But whenever I raise this issue with people, I can't help myself. I'm a political junkie. I talk it all day, whether I'm on the radio or not. But the one thing that people always say to me when we get into this subject is, well, aren't taxes just a part of life? I mean, what do you have to say to that?
Well, they are in a way a part of life, in that any entity is got the authority to demand a piece of the action when its own stuff is being used. But there's certainly nothing that is a part of life about being subject to the whims of some other entity to reach into one's pocket. That's fine if you are the subject of a monarch or some other kind of enslaved person, but it's not the way it is when you're actually a free entity, when you're actually a free person. Here in this country, we don't have that kind of structure. Taxes are by no means a part of life in a free society. So, the people who want everyone to let them reach into their pocket and take property from them at will certainly would like to encourage everyone to think that taxes are just a part of life. But that's not the way it is here. Okay.
Now, I heard you say earlier you said the income tax actually started with the late 1800s?
It was in 1862 during the Civil War. The Lincoln administration first instituted the tax. They actually first instituted it in 1861, but the Act of 1861 was entirely repealed and replaced by the 1862 version, which had just very, very slight differences. And that's the tax that we have today. In fact, a very good part of the current Internal Revenue Code traces its origins to pre-1913, or pre-16th Amendment, into the enactments of 1862, 1864, 65, 66, 72, 94, 1909, and then ultimately additional acts from 1913 on as well. It's a misunderstanding, a broad misunderstanding, I think a well-encouraged misunderstanding that the tax started with the 16th Amendment. That's absolutely not true. In fact, the 16th Amendment was simply a loophole-closing affair that closed down one minor loophole opened up by a court case in 1895 in the existing tax structure. And by no means did the tax begin with the 16th Amendment in 1913.
I was going to ask you about that because I thought I had remembered reading, and I can't remember if it was a Supreme Court or just a U.S. District Court, but somewhere along, some federal judge had said that the 16th Amendment conferred no new power of taxation to the Congress.
Yeah, well, happily, that's not just the District Court. That's the Supreme Court that has made that declaration, and it's made it repeatedly, many times, in fact, as many as a dozen or more times, and the cases in which that observation is most definitively made are routinely cited by the Supreme Court to this day. That remains existing law, and the current established doctrine related to the 16th Amendment. The 16th Amendment did not create any new tax. It didn't do anything except what I just said it did. It closed a little loophole that the Supreme Court itself had opened in the Pollock versus Farmers Loan and Trust decision in 1895, where the court said that to lay a tax on a dividend amounts to a tax on property, because the dividend is the proceeds of the ownership of stock, and to tax the proceeds is the same thing as to tax the stock itself. The stock is personal property, therefore that kind of application of the tax amounts to a property tax. And the court said you can't do that, and so the 16th Amendment was proposed and adopted, 16th Amendment says that tax can be laid on those dividends without the recipient of the dividend being able to resort to the source from which the dividend is derived. So it said that you can't look to the property from which the dividend issues in order to thwart the application of the tax. That's all the 16th Amendment did.
So the 16th Amendment isn't this huge amendment that grants all kinds of power to the federal government to actually...
Not even slightly.
Okay.
Not even slightly.
Now, I'm curious here. You talk about the constitutionality of the federal income tax. Now, the Constitution is very specific about the taxation powers that the Congress is granted by the people, isn't it?
Very, very specific indeed. And as I was saying before that last break, it specifically prohibits any federal tax on revenue generally, on just general economic activity. In fact, it prohibits what most people think the income tax is, because most people perceive the income tax as being a tax on making money, a tax on having earnings, and it is absolutely not that. But it tends to succeed in being applied that way because of people's ignorance about how the tax actually works and what it actually is laid on. People actually contribute to the process by which their undistinguished economic activity, their general revenue, does end up being taxed. And it only happens, for the most part, because individuals in ignorance contribute to the process of not only allowing but endorsing their unprivileged earnings as being treated as though they are privileged, as though they are the special kind that are taxed under the income tax.
So basically the American people forged their own shackles into slavery.
That's exactly correct. But they do it on an annual basis, and they can stop it on an annual basis as well.
So it's not hopeless.
It's absolutely not hopeless. No, every single occasion, every single year, it's a brand new situation, and every single year people are encouraged, not to say browbeaten or intimidated, into not learning anything about what they're doing, and to just continue to do as they have been doing, and cause their unprivileged, undistinguished economic activity to come to be treated as though it were privileged and distinguishable, and did in fact fall under the ambit of the tax. And once they have done that and signed their names in the appropriate places, saying that these things are true, as opposed to signing their names in the appropriate places saying that these things are not true, they end up being liable for the tax. And the tax is at that point quite properly taken from them. So it's all a matter of knowledge. It's all a matter of knowing what the law actually says and what the tax actually is on. And that's what Cracking the Code, the fascinating truth about taxation in America, is all about.
Now, I read something in your book that I thought was very interesting because, and actually, when I went to college, I had taken business law classes, a couple of law classes, so I'm not completely, a legalese virgin. I've been exposed to it before. But you talked about the Internal Revenue Code isn't the actual law.
No, that's correct. It's a prima facie representation of the law. It's a consolidation that provides a convenient, not quite a summary. It's actually a little more comprehensive than a summary, but it is not the statutory language itself. In some cases, the portions of the code are direct verbatim reproductions of the statutes that they reflect, and in other cases they're not. And in some cases, 10 or 15 sections of the actual statutes are consolidated into a single section in the Internal Revenue Code because the drafters of the code saw those sections as all being functionally the same and therefore could be consolidated in that fashion. But many sections of the code are consequently very misleading and not a good source of information. It's necessary to resort to the statutes directly in order to get truly accurate information.
Now, we've got IRS agents out there and accountants and tax attorneys. Aren't these people aware of what the law actually says? I mean, isn't that part of their job to be aware of the exact law?
It's not really part of their job, and I think that most of them are not aware. I think if they were, they'd have to do some things differently than the way they do. Although it isn't to say that that's true of all these folks.